someone who has not come up through the academic ranks, as I guess you guys are going to do, but who has, in my case, joined the College of IST in 2008 after doing lots and lots of other things for the 28 years before that. I'm also the current chairperson of the IST Academic Integrity Committee. As you'll see later on in the presentation, every college in this university, mandated by Penn State, has an academic integrity committee that deals with issues broadly relating to ethics and academic integrity, and also adjudicates cases where there are challenges to allegations. But more on that when we get further into the presentation. We'll see how it goes with time. If it's running long, we'll have a little break in between. If it looks like it's going to be wound up maybe shorter, I'll plow right through, and you guys can get a good start on your next event, which I guess is an individual lunch. That being said, I don't mean to rush anybody. If at any time during the presentation you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. I don't mind being interrupted. This should be as much of a dialogue as it could be. Okay? With that in mind, any questions before we start? So I always tell my students in the courses I teach what I'm going to talk about. We'll start with a sort of a general discussion of ethics, then maybe get into some, I'll take this out of order maybe, some of the resources, I'll go over those briefly to show that what Penn State resources are available that deal with the issues of ethics broadly, and then academic integrity. Then we'll go over procedures, policies, and then, if time permits, some examples of cases where you could decide if they are, in fact, a violation of academic integrity or not. We may or may not get to these, but I'll make sure these materials are made available to you if you want them. So, what's ethics? Anyone want to tell me quickly what ethics is broadly? What's ethics? Anybody? What do we mean by ethics? Honesty.
Not to cheat.
Not to cheat, yeah. Ethical behavior. Ethics is important in every aspect of professional, personal life. Basically, I guess, moral correctness, honesty of a specified conduct. And then academic integrity is sort of a subset in the academic context of ethics. Moral code or ethical policy of academia. Now, obviously, I said ethics is important in a lot of aspects of political, personal life. I mentioned that I was a professor of practice and that I did other things. What I didn't mention is that my jobs before this were, I started out as a lawyer with a law firm in New York City. And although lawyers get a bad reputation for honesty and ethics, I can tell you that the state of New York takes things very seriously. In order to be a member of the New York bar in good standing, you have to not only avoid any ethical impropriety, but as they say, even the appearance of an impropriety. Even if something looks like it's improper or unethical, it causes problems. After I worked a few years as a lawyer, I then joined the United States Diplomatic Service and served there for over 20 years, going to different embassies and working in Washington. And as you probably, if you followed anything of the current political campaign, you know that the issues of honesty and ethics are coming up again and again. While the government also gets a bad reputation sometimes for ethics and honesty, I can tell you that there are many structures in place within the US government, and I'm sure those of you who are not from the United States, the governments of the countries where you come from, that are designed to ensure ethical behavior at all levels. So it goes far beyond academia. But of course, that's where you guys are, and that's why we're focusing on ethics in academia and specifically academic integrity. Question, comment? No. So I'm going to go over briefly because you could look up all this stuff, and I don't know how deeply we need to go into this, but I want to show these things for two reasons. These are some of the structures that are in place at Penn State. Okay, I'm showing them for two reasons. One is that I want you to know that they exist, that these are resources that are available. There's websites for all of them. But secondly, to really underscore right from the start that Penn State as a university, as a major research university, takes issues of ethics and academic integrity, as I said at the start, very, very seriously. First and foremost, there's an Office of University Ethics and Compliance. They do a lot more things than academic integrity. they promote sort of ethics all across the university. They do things like academics, athletics compliance, make sure that the athletic teams are in compliance with all NCAA rules and things like that. Athletics integrity, we're not having cheating, we're not having students, athletes using drugs, things like that. They deal with things like export controls, intellectual property. Believe it or not, there are issues related to technologies that are being developed here and that some might be subject to various controls placed on them by the US government, things like that. There is a privacy officer in the Office of Ethics and Compliance. Various types of youth programs you may see in the summer here, if you've been here for any part of the summer besides now. We have lots of high school kids and younger students coming here for various types of programs. How they interact with the university and the procedures that are in place to make sure that everything goes well with their stays here, that's all part of the Office of Ethics and Compliance. Basically, they're the office that is the umbrella for everything, making sure that we as a university, maintain the highest standards of ethics, honesty, integrity. Lots of training, educational programs. These are the policy people. They also have the broad guidelines that we'll get to in a minute more specifically that show all of us how we should be acting as representatives of this major university. Right? Don't know if I need to spend too much more time on that. Think of this as the overarching sort of policy folks who deal with the issues of ethics, and as a subset of that, academic integrity at Penn State. Okay, questions, comments so far? Office of Compliance, umbrella. But there's more. There's an institute called the Rock Ethics Institute. Don't know where the name comes from. Now we're going to drop down to sort of a sub-level. These guys get involved more in practice. If the Office of Compliance are the theory and policy folks, then the Rock Ethics Institute is more hands-on. Right? What do they do? Promote awareness and inquiry across the university through emphasis on education, research, and outreach. So there's a lot of resources you could take advantage of if you want to, offered by the Rock Ethics Institute. There's courses that deal with theoretical and practical issues involving ethics. A lot of them are in the College of Philosophy, not necessarily at the graduate level, but there are a number of courses available. An ethics curriculum here. I don't know if a lot of universities have that. Penn State does. Research. There is ongoing research at various levels on outstanding ethical issues, including, I think, moving up in priority is our issues of academic integrity. And then finally, outreach, working with political, public leaders, community leaders in outreach activities that also have to do with ethics broadly. So these are the folks that do more hands-on practical things. Okay. And yet there's still more. There's a thing called SARI, or SARI. SARI is probably better. Scholarship and Research Integrity Program. This is another key resource at Penn State, SARI. You can see they have their website. You can look it up yourself. These are the folks that offer Penn State researchers and scholars lots of education in the responsible conduct of research. Now we're getting more probably into the types of things that many of you will be doing at the graduate level, right, and beyond. Launched in 2009. Provides researchers at various stages with opportunities to discuss, identify, work on ethical issues. All scholars, whether undergraduate researchers, graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, research associates, they all confront ethical issues in their professions. We've seen it. And sadly, we've seen, I'll get to some statistics later for IST, but we've seen an increase in the number of sort of incidences where research has been done not in an ethical way across the board at Penn State. Now, that doesn't mean it's endemic. Each year, thousands of Penn State investigators, researchers, research teams conduct research and scholarly activities with the utmost in integrity. That's the good news. But the bad news is each year, some Penn State personnel are in fact involved in research misconduct allegations, inquiries, and investigations. Okay. So what does this program do? Two parts, an online course and an interactive discussion-based component. The online part, offered through this CITI program, provides common language and understanding of the history and principles of the responsible conduct of research, and then more specifically academic integrity. This presentation that I'm giving to you, I think, is being offered sort of as part of the SARI program. Yeah. The second part is sort of an interactive discussion-based program. Right? The discussion-based part is where we can do more in-depth exploration of important issues, but basically this provides a framework mostly focused on research. And for that reason, I thought it was very important to mention that it is a structure that is in place at Penn State. Okay? So we have these three structures, sort of Office of Ethics and Compliance, Rock Ethics Institute, and the Scholarship and Research Integrity Program. You don't need to necessarily do anything with any of these. I want you to know that these exist, and especially that they are an indication that this university takes these issues very, very seriously. Comments, questions, concerns so far about this stuff? As a further indication then of how Penn State views ethical and academic integrity issues, I'll mention here that the concepts of ethics and professional academic integrity are also enshrined in what's called the Penn State Code of Conduct. Right? This comes out of the Office of Student Conduct. It's a very important office in the administration of Penn State. It's one of 19 units within the greater or larger Office of Student Affairs. This is a resource to promote sort of a safe and ethical learning environment. They deal with a variety of issues. You can see it goes beyond ethics and academic integrity, harassment, sexual abuse, things like that. But, and this is the reason why I mention it, a very, very important component of the Code of Conduct is in fact academic integrity. Yeah, and the university identifies all types of unacceptable student behavior. It's on the website. You can look at all the different aspects of it. How do they define academic integrity? There's a definition of academic integrity, which is what we're interested in today, right in the Code of Conduct: the pursuit of scholarly activities or activity in an open, honest, and responsible manner. This is the university-wide definition. This has not necessarily anything to do with Penn State. I'm sorry, with IST, but it's the university-wide definition. Basic guiding principle for all academic activity, and all members of the university are expected to act in accordance with this principle. So personal integrity, respect for others' dignity, and so on, environment in which all can succeed. This is sort of the boilerplate language, but there's a focus on academic integrity. The commitment not to engage in or tolerate acts of falsification, misrepresentation, deception. Remember, if you take nothing else away from this, Penn State takes this seriously, and Penn State defines academic integrity rather broadly. And some of you may have had, from the places you come from or the backgrounds you have, maybe some slightly different views, and it's not necessarily bad, they're just different. There are differences around the world of how people deal with and how people consider certain issues that are related to ethics and honesty and so on. So acts of dishonesty, academic integrity violations, are basically considered to violate the fundamental principles of the university. This is the essence of academic integrity at Penn State. As you can see, it's a rather broad definition. So maintaining these standards of academic integrity are supposed to promote the good reputation of individual scholars, but you, as scholars here, are also representing Penn State, the image of Penn State to the world. And then as a drop-down to the college that we are all in, it also reflects on the reputation of the College of Information Sciences and Technology, and the faculty, staff, and students. So the point is, violations of academic integrity really go beyond damage to the reputation of the individuals involved or the imposition of sanctions against those individuals. In addition, these violations really reflect on the university as a whole and on the college with which an individual is associated. How are we doing so far? I mean, I'm maybe saying a lot of the same thing over and over again, but there's a reason. You really need to have this sink in. This is a huge issue at Penn State. Okay. Now, in addition to being in the Code of Conduct, academic integrity is, in fact, one of the 4 overarching things that are called Penn State principles that were articulated back in, I think, 2001, sort of university-wide principles. Yet another indication of the seriousness with which the administration of this university considers this issue. You can see these: respect the dignity, that's okay, demonstrate social responsibility, responsible for your academic progress, but I will practice academic integrity. There's only 4 of these principles that are supposed to guide all of us at Penn State, and number 2 is academic integrity, okay? Maintaining academic integrity. And if I haven't told you enough about how seriously we take this, we all have to put this in our syllabus for every course that we come up with. There is a policy statement from the Faculty Senate at Penn State that requires each instructor to include in his or her syllabus a statement about academic integrity. This is to avoid, I suppose, the the possibility of students saying, well, I didn't know that's, I didn't know I couldn't do that. I didn't know this was a violation. The instructors are supposed to spell it out up front in every syllabus. Right? It's a guiding principle. This idea of not engaging in or tolerating any types of academic dishonesty. There's an example here that comes from the College of IST. Now, it is, of course, up to instructors to elaborate on these policies and to try to spell out clearly what's accepted and what's not accepted. Different instructors may have different views. Obviously, there are core elements of academic integrity. We'll get to some examples later on of what is clearly considered to be a violation, what is and is not permissible. But there are some nuances that instructors may have. This might not apply necessarily to you that much at the graduate level, although it may. Certain instructors may have certain views about collaborative work, what can be done in teams, who is responsible for teamwork, what can be claimed as part of a teamwork, whether a collaboration on individual assignments is or is not going to be allowed. There are nuances that can be determined by the instructor, and the instructor has an obligation to the students to spell this out in pretty specific form. If you encounter lack of clarity in any of your coursework here, it's up to you, I guess, to ask the instructor for clarification. The instructor is obligated to clarify. Questions about that? Because that gets into the specifics of maybe coursework that you will be doing. The instructor has an obligation to spell out, in addition to the overarching guidelines that I've talked about here, and that you can find way more information about on the Penn State various websites. The instructor does have an obligation to put this stuff in a syllabus. Yeah, question, comment?
Rather than having everybody sign the academic integrity statement before each individual course, is it possible instead to have every potential student signing out of the university sign it upon entrance to the university?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, this usually does not involve anybody signing for anything. By taking the course and having, you're responsible for having read the syllabus for any course that you're going to take here. And as a precondition sort of enrolling in the course, you're responsible for what's in the syllabus. I don't think we actually, I don't make my students sign anything. I guess some instructors do. Yes, that would be a policy. What that would then maybe, the one reason why we might not do that, I'm just sort of theorizing here, is that I just mentioned that certain instructors may have certain nuances about how they view collaborative work, how they view different, and they might differ slightly from what the university as a whole would impose. So that's probably the reason why it's done at the level of individual courses. But a very good question. Other questions, comments? So this statement that has to go into the syllabus, you have to refer to things like cheating, plagiarism, fabrication of information, or citations. Facilitating acts of academic dishonesty by others, that's an interesting one. In my old legal profession, we talked about, aiding and abetting a criminal. Aiding and abetting a crime is, in many cases, itself a crime. The same applies to academic integrity. Not only cheating yourself, but facilitating the cheating of others. And that could be done in a lot of ways. It can be done by, carelessly making your work available for actual copying, which has happened here in this building. I can't think of other examples, but I know that there have been cases where students have been issued a violation of academic integrity for having helped others do the violation. Okay. Obviously, submitting work of another person, work previously used, tampering with work of other students, that's actually been done. Okay. So this applies to all courses here, and this is the sort of the IST version. Okay. Now, the Faculty Senate policy on academic honesty, which is sort of a variant of the phrase academic integrity, also mandates that any violation or allegation of a violation of academic integrity gets investigated, and where warranted, punitive action will be taken. And I'll get to some of them later, but I can tell you that there are a lot of these happen every year. In the last academic year in IST, we've had probably about 40 allegations of academic integrity where an instructor has filled out a form and an academic or even more serious, in some cases, disciplinary sanction has been imposed. Some of those have been overturned, a few. Not all of them. The ones that, some go to the committee. And I guess I'll get ahead of myself and explain. I'll get more into procedures later, but if an instructor alleges academic integrity violation concerning a given student, the student may simply accept the violation, and the committee of which I am the current chair would not have any further action on it. It is only those cases in which a student challenges the allegation that the case goes up to the Academic Integrity Committee, and then the committee can make a decision one way or the other. So some of those cases may have been resolved, but take a number of just approximately 40, more or less, of academic integrity violations in this building in the last academic year. And I don't know what the figures are for Penn State, but you could probably extrapolate as to how many colleges we have and a rough estimate of how many students are involved and get a number for yourself. So as I said, any violation, a form is submitted, has to be signed by both the instructor and the student, submitted to the senior associate dean. In addition to the university-wide emphasis on academic integrity, I've already mentioned this, the College of IST has its own supplemental information about academic integrity. These are the guidelines sort of from IST. They come from the IST website, if you want to find it. Basically, they say students should act with a mutual commitment to personal integrity, respect for dignity, and so on, create and maintain an environment which all can succeed. This includes honesty and responsibility in representing your own work and acknowledging the contributions of others. Academic integrity in IST is taken very, very, very seriously. Okay. So good. So far, so good. Clear. What are some examples of what IST considers academic dishonesty? By far, I guess, the most common violation is plagiarism. In fact, of the 40 cases that I referred to, probably more than half of them involve what we would call plagiarism. Do I understand what's plagiarism? Do I understand what plagiarism is? Somebody help me out here. Go ahead, sir.
Without a citation.
Okay. Offering something without a citation. Yeah. More broadly, maybe?
Plagiarism is taking someone else's work and claiming credit as your own.
Taking someone else's work and claiming credit as if it's your own, more or less?
It's not giving proper credit when credit is due.
Not giving proper credit where credit is due. Some cases probably are pretty obvious. You take work that was given by submitted by another student, the student gives you that work, and you submit that work in a subsequent semester for the similar or same assignment, and it's clearly not your work. But it can get a little more tricky than that. Okay. Basically, the act of stating or implying, as the definitions have said, thank you, that another person's work is your own when it wasn't. All right. More sort of formally, the unauthorized use or close imitation. It does not have to be word for word to be plagiarism. We have cases where there has been incidents of plagiarism in this building where the act has not included verbatim word for word copying of someone else's work or a cited work without, or a work that was by someone else without attributing this source or citation, but also close imitation. Also the thoughts of another person. and then something used and represented in this manner. There's a number of variants to this basic definition, but I think you all get it. They all essentially focus on the same elements. To go a little bit more specific, Penn State, there's a website called the Teaching and Learning with Technology website at Penn State. They have, as you can see here, a rather extensive definition of plagiarism that spells it out even more in more detail. So, I mean, examples given. Submit a paper to be graded that you have not written on your own. Maybe the classic example. Copy answers or text from another classmate. Had that happen in this building. Quote or paraphrase without crediting the original author. The point you made about citations. Cite data without crediting the original source, another way of saying the same thing. Propose another author's idea as if it were your own. Fabricating references. Yes, there have been cases, not necessarily in IST, but in Penn State, where research data has been fabricated, made up, or falsified. Findings have been changed to support the arguments that a given researcher was going to make. We've had things like this happen at Penn State. These are all considered violations of academic integrity. Then submitting somebody else's presentation with maybe only minor alterations. You can look on the website, but these are the types of things that Penn State considers to be plagiarism. And plagiarism is, as I said, by far one of probably the major element of what is the academic integrity violations that happen here. Okay. Some examples that are the ones that come up most at Penn State. Wholesale copying should be pretty obvious to anybody, right? Most people picture it as handing in a paper they copied from a website, from a friend. This is clearly plagiarism. There's no question. The person did not do any original research or writing or thinking, probably, and the work is created by another author, yet the submitter has put his or her name on it. Cut and paste is another example of plagiarism. Copying large chunks of text from one or more original sources and inserting it into the assignment. I teach at the undergraduate level several law-related courses here on privacy law and things like that. And I ask my students to do, as law students do in other contexts, briefings of cases. So they're supposed to take court cases and summarize the court case. So take a 10-page court case and distill it down to 2 pages in which you would be able to tell the reader, this is what the court case was about in its essence. This is why it's important. These are the ramifications of this case and so on. What happened, why, what the legal ruling was. And increasingly over the last several semesters, and I've had a problem with it, I have students who are simply lifting big blocks of text from the court case and just putting it into their case brief. That's not what the case brief is about. The case brief is to summarize in your own words. Okay, I get it. If there's one particular phrase that the court said in their ruling that you can't really paraphrase, you can insert that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about shift, copy, just chunks, paragraph after paragraph of word-for-word text from the court case. That does not involve any original thinking. These are violations of academic integrity, this cut and paste stuff. You might not have, realized that. Probably did. How about inappropriately paraphrasing? This is where quoted text is altered only slightly from the original and no acknowledgement of the original author is given. I've had some students, come back to this same example, some students who think, I guess, they're slightly more clever than the others, who will take paragraphs from the court case, but they will change a word, one word in every sentence. But a careful reading of the assignment, and most instructors, including me, read these things carefully, shows that it in fact is largely taken verbatim from somebody else and given as your interpretation of the case. Right? There's sometimes a lack of clarity as to when you need to cite your sources. And if time permits, we'll go into maybe a couple examples at the end of this. There's this concept of common knowledge, right? I think you guys have been through that already in your academic careers, right? Things like common knowledge. The United States is one of the largest countries in land on the surface of the earth. That's common knowledge. You don't need to cite that somewhere. You don't need to go to some atlas and cite that, right? The short answer is you should cite a source anytime you incorporate an idea, quote, data, image, or other content that is not yours, unless it's common knowledge. Unless it's common knowledge. So the term common knowledge refers to anything you can reasonably expect other people to know. It snows in the northern part of the United States pretty much every winter. You wouldn't have to go to some weather data website and give a citation for that, right? Common knowledge. For instance, the fact that there are bilingual speakers in the United States, and you're doing some research on linguistics. To state that there are many bilingual speakers, English, Spanish, English, something else, in the United States is probably common knowledge. A paper that then gave specific percentages or numbers of how many people speak English and Arabic, English and Farsi, English and Spanish. That would be not common knowledge. That would be something that would require a citation. Okay. So far, so good? Because this probably gets more into the type of work that you, at your level of academic pursuit, will be getting involved in. Yeah, first in the back and then front. First, yeah.
What's Penn State's stance on self-plagiarism?
That's a tricky one, where students, if I think I understand what you mean, like where you'll refer to a paper you maybe use in another context, another assignment, another course in an earlier semester that has things that are on point for the assignment you now have to do. Is that sort of what you're getting at, or?
Yeah, where it's, suppose you have a paper that's been published, and then you're going to use, suppose someone has a published paper, and then they just take a chunk of text from their original writing and put it into another paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a sort of a gray area because on the one hand, it is in fact your own work, but it is your own work that was submitted originally in a different context, presumably. So I think the default position is you should make some kind of reference to the fact that it was, cite yourself, work previously cited. I think maybe individual instructors may have different views on that, but that's the way I would treat that. That's the best answer I can give you on that one. There was another question here, sir.
How would you define common knowledge if it's like common knowledge within a domain? So it's
Yeah.
like general public's not going to know this.
Right. These are right. You guys are maybe in specific domains. So in the IT world or something, or in the information sciences world, X or Y can be common knowledge. It's a good question. I don't necessarily have a magic answer for it. What I would say is that I think it would go by domain. Common knowledge is not, you can go beyond, like obviously that it snows in Pennsylvania in the winter. You don't have to be a domain expert to know that. I would say that the test should be for common knowledge in the domain. Check with your professors if you have any questions about that, but that would be my interpretation of it. There's another comment or question, sir?
Yeah. If there is 1 or 2 points in my paper is similar to the one paper earlier times. However, I swear I do not read the paper, and I swear I do not know the points have been published before.
Yeah, we've had cases like this, and then it just goes. Yeah.
Can I interrupt? For example, because the other paper is published in a very rare conferences or in a very rare journals.
Yeah, we've had cases like this that have actually gone to the committee, and the committee has had to determine the credibility of the person who says, "I swear I didn't read that earlier work. I don't know about that earlier work." That will be a factual issue that will have to be discussed and considered by the committee based on all of the evidence that's presented. I can't really give you an answer in any given case on that. If that involved you in a case like that, you would have to convince, and an instructor gave you a violation, you would then have to convince the committee for whatever reason that you were innocent of that you were not aware of the prior work and so on. But it would just go to the committee. Other questions?
So in terms of academic integrity, if you have, what's like your investigative philosophy? So for example, does it need evidence beyond reasonable doubt in order for the student to be guilty? Or if it's a situation where it's he said, she said, what exactly how much evidence does it need to be completely proven, or can it be kind of, okay, it's probable this student did this? And
Yeah.
so
You know, we've never gone through the various standards of evidence as they have in law, you know, clear and convincing evidence, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, preponderance of the evidence. The committee basically votes on whether, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but it's okay. The committee basically votes on whether they think it is more likely than not that the violation occurred. So it's probably not the standard that it probably wouldn't hold up in court. We've never talked about percentages, but each committee member basically gets a vote. I as chairperson would, in a case of a tie, if there's an even number of people who show up that day, would get the tiebreaker vote. But it's basically, you know, based on all that you've heard, do you believe that a violation occurred? We've never actually got down into the percentages. Good question, but maybe we should. But you know, I don't know. As lay people, I mean, I'm a lawyer. There's some other lawyers, but most of us aren't lawyers. In fact, we have students on the committee as well. It's not just faculty. There's a graduate student, always representative, an undergraduate student. They don't have legal backgrounds, and probably the nuances of what levels of evidence there are would be lost on them. But it's basically everybody looks at the evidence. You know, examines the evidence and examines their own conscience and says, you know, do we think a violation occurred? And then gets a vote on it.
thank you.
Other questions about this? I don't mean to cut this debate short. Yeah.
Do you have a repository of papers or former work that is automatically compares student work to whenever it's submitted?
I don't know if other instructors do it for, you know,
I mean, university-wide.
university-wide, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I could get to this later. You may have heard of this. There are these commercial services available like Turnitin and things like that, where you can basically enter text and it will give you matches. I believe I have a Turnitin account, for example. A lot of instructors use services of that type. You know, I do keep examples of earlier work, but I just don't have, I mean, without using something like Turnitin, unless I see something that's really just very familiar to me, and the chances of that are probably, with all the different courses I teach, are probably not going to be the case. I don't know what other instructors do. The short answer is I'm not aware of any university-wide depository or repository, as you said. It's a great question. I just don't know. Don't think so, but I don't know. Other questions about sort of this plagiarism so far? Yes, go ahead.
So, what consists of the committee member? So who does the
What's the composition of the committee? Okay, I would get to this later, but I don't mind taking it out of order. There are like 4 faculty members, or sometimes 5, depending on who can make it, and always 1 student and 1 graduate student and 1 undergraduate student representative. And they're not always the same people. Like this is probably the last presentation I'll be giving for a while, because I'm finishing up my role as chairperson of the committee. As of next week, it's going to be somebody else. So we serve for like a 2-year. I served for 2 years on it, and other faculty members maybe for a year. Last year I wasn't the chairperson. This year I was, and then and so on it goes. So there's a rotating committee that always has, usually at a minimum, 5 faculty members, 1 graduate student, 1 undergraduate student. So there is student representation. Okay. Yeah.
For example, for a common set of problem, some people may have particular same perception and the end result will likely match, but they may apply different methods. So that come under plagiarism.
If you can demonstrate that you applied different methods but came to the same analytical conclusions or something like that, I think you're on safe ground. And you would have to maybe show that if there was an allegation made. You would have to demonstrate that you applied different methods. And if you can show it, that your work, that the methodology was different, I think you'd be okay.
So wouldn't that be a case of not doing a proper literature survey?
Okay, you can make that argument too. Yeah. Again, you're asking some very good gray area questions that I think all of them would have to go up to the committee, something like this, and be decided on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, I always tell my students in my law courses this. This being the United States, there's no big 1,000-page booklet that spells out everything for you. You would have to go to Germany if you want something like that. We don't have that in U.S. law, and we really don't have it in the academic integrity world. And then I'll mention now one other phenomenon that is of growing concern to the university. These are these commercial sites. Some of these names may be familiar to you: Cramster, Course Hero, Quizlet, all course papers. These are commercial websites that have solutions to problems, sometimes copies of previous exams, lecture notes, summaries of literary classics, things like that, help with physics, math, computer science. Now, I get it that there is a viable commercial use for these websites. In many cases, I think originally they were designed to have students upload things like study guides that would say, you know, I've come up with this study guide for this course, and I offer it to the world in return for getting something back. I guess some of these you have to offer something up in order to get full access to what's on these websites. And I and many other instructors have no problem with that, with students having uploaded study notes and things like that. But as you probably know, these websites have morphed into something else. They are now being used or misused in many cases as places to engage in blatant plagiarism, where copies of previous exams are being uploaded. Now, the owners of these websites say, well, if instructors are not active enough to alter the text or the questions on their exams or assignments from semester to semester, that's their problem. And there is a point to be made in that. Instructors should vary the assignments that they give, or at least the questions that are asked. That's clear. But there are cases where that might not necessarily be possible to do every single semester. A case in point is that some instructors, including myself, in some of our courses, we use multi-week team-based simulation exercises that are based on complicated scenarios for intelligence analysis or counterterrorism analysis. And these scenarios, to build one of these with maybe 100 different inputs that the students get over a 4-week period, it takes over a year to build one of these. It's unrealistic to expect that we could build a new one every semester. I mean, I have more than one. I have maybe 7 that I use. I try to alternate them over the semesters, so nobody will get the same one 2 in a row. But there are limits to what instructors can do. And these types of things are now appearing on these websites. And there are students who are just, instead of doing their own work, are simply copying the work from these websites. Now, use of these websites, I put may here constitute plagiarism, may. Penn State's policy, at the request of the administration, I checked with the Office of Student Affairs earlier this year, and a direct quote from the Office of Student Affairs is that when a student takes information from one of these sites and uses it as their own work, we've across the university held the student accountable for a violation of the Code of Conduct. Specifically, submitting another person's work and claiming it as your own, which is a violation of academic integrity. So basically, if it's determined that a student took a submission directly from one of these websites, even if the instructor was too lazy to use the same question. So far, Penn State's been considering it to be an AI violation. It's just the same as if you've copied it out of a book or another website. So I don't know how much that would apply to the level of academic work that you are going to be doing, but keep in mind that Penn State, as university-wide, and certainly within the College of IST, we are aware of the use and indeed misuse of these websites and take it quite seriously. Any questions, comments about this? This is a growing serious issue at Penn State. I believe, according to my sources in the Office of Student Affairs, that there is sometime during this semester, like a lot of people at the university at the highest levels are going to sit down and hash out a more detailed policy about what to do about these commercial websites like Course Hero. But they're an increasing concern, and indeed they are an increasing source of allegations of academic integrity violation. Question, please.
So, in terms of Quizlet, so if you have a homework or like in a quiz format, and then you're given all the multiple choice questions, instead of going into your textbook and looking for the answers, you go to Quizlet and then you just get the answers directly from there. Is that considered a...
Well, I guess the difference would be, I didn't know if I understand, what you're saying is on Quizlet, is it the same thing that would have been in the textbook, or is it actually an example of somebody else's exam with the right answers given?
I think they're just like study guides. They just give you all you kind of, you can, instead of flipping out your book,
Right.
directly.
Yeah, study guides, again, it's a gray area. Study guides themselves that do not give the answers are probably okay on these websites. What some of us have found is that, and for this reason, by the way, you'll find that instructors anymore do not usually make quizzes and the text of exams available to students on a permanent basis. We found that students have scanned in, once they've completed exams, have scanned in the actual exam text, and these have shown up on Course Hero. So it's one thing to study from a study guide that says, you'll need to know for the final exam the 4 basic privacy torts that are involved in litigation about privacy in the United States. That's okay. But something up on Course Hero or Quizlet that says, this is the actual question, it's a multiple choice question, A, B, C, D, and the correct answer is C, that's not. And that's what we found are showing up on these websites. Does that sort of answer your question? Okay. Another question, sir.
If not commercial websites,
Yeah.
however, if Wikipedia, there is also a step-by-step solution to. Is that okay?
Well, if it's a good question. So you're saying in addition to commercial websites, some of this stuff appears on places like Wikipedia. If it can be determined that it was put up and it was somebody else's work that is not cited, that's the issue. It's just like either using somebody else's work as your own. If you're talking about step-by-step guides for math, maybe, or things like that. If it's determined that it is not your own work, that's the key. Maybe that's one way to put it. The key element in all of this is, are you really submitting work that is not your own, wherever you got it from? And I guess, I would have to know exactly what types of things you're referring to that would be on Wikipedia, if there are things that were uploaded by somebody else for this specific course and involve the answers to a question or a homework project that required you to build something or construct something or some mathematical equations, and they were given in the exact form that they appear on your quiz or on your test or on your assignment, I think they'd be considered violations, regardless of where they appear. The key issue, as you can see, is, are you submitting work that is really your original work? To refer to somebody else's study guide that would refer you to the main things that you need to focus on with respect to a future assignment or a future quiz or a future exam, this is probably okay. And I believe, and the owners of these websites will tell you that that's what these websites were intended to do. Like there was a thing called Cliff's Notes for literary works in the old days you could look at. That's not considered necessarily cheating. A summary of great novels in a very digestible form. But these have now gone beyond this to providing specific answers to specific assignments and specific questions. You can go on these websites and key in IST 452 at the undergraduate level, and you will see stuff that probably should not be on there. That if students refer to that stuff, they're committing plagiarism. Okay. This is important. This, I've done this presentation a few times. This is the first time we've included material on Course Hero and Quizlet and whatever they're called, all course papers, because this has mushroomed. There's been an explosion of incidents involving these particular websites. Other questions about that? So maybe to just give the broadest possible information about what academic integrity is and what isn't. Other examples, obviously cheating on a test, buying or selling a paper. There are places where you can purchase paper. Having someone take a test for you, that's probably not going to happen at your, first of all, let me say that I hope none of this ever happens to any of you. I mean, I'm confident that none of you in this room will ever have any problem with this, but I am obligated to give you this presentation. But we've had someone take a test in some of the bigger classes. You may have taken a tour of the building, seen this room called the Cybertorium down here, with its seats, 150 or so students. We've had cases where someone has, I think, taken another test for someone else. Unauthorized possession of a test. That really hasn't happened. I think it's happened elsewhere at Penn State where somebody hacked into or broke into an instructor's office and got an advanced copy of a test. I don't know if that's true. I've heard that. Submitting work previously used without permission. This gets to the student's question about self-citations. I think normally instructors should or will tell you what their policy is on that if they want you to, if you're able to do that, and if you should, what a citation of yourself you would need to give. But it is considered, it is mentioned by Penn State, submitting work previously used without permission, submitting it in another context. Unauthorized collaboration. Penn State and IST, more so probably at the undergraduate level, but maybe at your level as well, promote collaborative learning. When I was a Penn State student here many years ago as an undergraduate, we didn't do a lot of team-based stuff. You basically did your own thing. But one of the things that's been striking to me here, having returned now as an instructor, having been a student here 30-some years before, is that there's a real emphasis on team-based assignments, at least at the undergraduate level. And then how teams cooperate and what teams are allowed to do and who gets credit for the work, these are things that instructors need to make clear. So the general rubric of unauthorized collaboration. Fabrication of citations, that probably applies more to academic work at your level, right? Where you're doing maybe more scholarly research as opposed to multiple choice test taking. So fabrication of citations, that has happened. Falsifying or fabricating data, two different things. Falsifying means you have data but it doesn't quite support your arguments as well as you'd like them to, so you just kind of tweak it a little bit to change a few things here and there to make it more supportive of the arguments, assertions, points you're trying to make. Fabrication is probably, I don't know if it's worse, but it's different. That's where you just make it up. You don't take someone's data and alter it, you just make it up. Just completely make it up, and there have been cases of that. I mentioned this here, this probably won't be a question for you. Violations of course attendance policies. Various instructors at Penn State and certainly in IST have different attendance policies. Do you need to, is there mandatory attendance? Some instructors say, I'm not your mom or dad, come if you want to. If you don't come, you won't know what's going on and you won't get a good grade. Others have a very strict attendance policy. We've had cases in those instances where instructors have had an attendance policy. They've had an attendance pin that can be entered in the Angel website or things like that, or an attendance sign-up sheet. Students signing for other students who were not physically present in the room when attendance was required. These, as petty as they may seem to you, these are considered academic integrity violations because of this, as I said, this very zero tolerance that Penn State has. If I've impressed nothing upon you, I should impress that upon you. These are considered academic integrity violations. Now, because it's of particular interest for students engaged in scholarly research, let me just go into a little bit falsifying and fabricating data, because this comes into the work at your level. All right? Integrity of the research depends, obviously, on the integrity of the data being used and the data record. So falsifications, fabrications, they call into question the integrity of the data itself and represent very serious issues. And again, I got ahead of myself. I just basically defined them already. These are, again, the definitions. Falsifying and fabricating, remember, they're two different things. Falsifying is essentially omitting, altering research materials in such a way that the results are no longer accurately reflected, or fabricating, you basically invent it. And there have been issues, and there are issues, I think, every year at Penn State. Both of these are considered the most serious offenses in scientific research. They basically challenge the credibility of everyone and everything involved. And this is the kind of stuff that really gives a bad name, not only to the student, but to the university as a whole and the college. So, And there have been a number of well-documented incidents of falsifying or fabricating data at Penn State that I won't go into from previous years. It appears to be a growing problem. It's usually uncovered. How do you uncover this stuff? Interestingly, it's usually uncovered when other researchers seek to duplicate, often in a technical context, they seek to duplicate the results and the research and are unable to verify the data. And that raises red flags and causes people to look more closely at this stuff. Okay? Serious, serious issue. Okay. So in general, academic dishonesty, right? This is these are all the things, again, you've seen it: inappropriate use, plagiarism, cheating, falsification of materials, misrepresentation, selling, sometimes improper computer usage. There are various exams that are given mostly at the undergraduate level that would either be sort of open book or not. We've had students who do screen flipping. They're taking a test or a quiz on one screen in the computer in the room here, and they're flipping back and forth from a cheat sheet or a study guide, things like that. These are all the types of things. The various consequences that I'll get into maybe in a minute: you can have a warning sometimes. Otherwise, if it gets to a formal allegation, reduction in grade, failure in the course, sometimes suspension if it's really, really, really seriously. Just a word about procedures. As I said, I hope that none of you ever get involved in the procedure. But if you do, these are some things you would need to know about it. When there's a suspicion of academic integrity, dishonesty, or a violation, the faculty member informs the students of a violation and provides the student an opportunity to respond. Right? There's a form that needs to be filled out. There's an academic integrity form. It's on the Penn State website. The student will have the choice to accept or contest the charge. If the charge is accepted, it goes no further. With the committee. It doesn't come to us in the committee. It does, a record of it is given over to the Buki building to main Penn State records. I'll get into more of that in a second. Usually as a student, you have 5 business days to sign the form. Now, by signing the form, you can either say, yes, I did it, or no, I want it to go to a hearing. But you have to sign it. If you don't acknowledge the form, if you just ignore the form after 5 days, and this is important, there is the default position is that the sanction will go into effect. It is deemed as if you have admitted to the violation. So if you ever are given, I hope you never do, but if you ever are given a violation, you need to do something within those 5 days. You can challenge the violation, okay? So upon the receipt of the form, again, you have 5 days to accept the allegation and whatever sanction or sanctions your instructor has imposed, or contest either the allegation or the sanction. And that's important. If you contest, you can say, you're accused of having copied information from another student on a quiz. And the instructor says you engaged in an academic integrity violation, and your sanction is going to be you get a 0 on that quiz. You can accept it and say, yeah, that's fine. I did it, and I'll take the 0. It goes no further, doesn't go to the committee. You can then make a challenge. The challenge can either be you challenge the violation itself, saying, I didn't commit the violation, and I want to have it be heard by the committee. Or you can say, I did the violation, but I think the sanction is way too severe. You see the difference? You can challenge the sanction as opposed to the actual allegation. Okay. And that would be saying that, and then that would be considered by the committee. Okay. If the student accepts the allegation and the sanction, the case is closed, unless the student has a previous academic integrity violation. So in those cases where we have had an academic integrity violation, we then, once a case goes up to the front office, they then query the Buki building to see if the student has had an earlier violation. If it is the first violation, whatever the instructor has imposed then is the sanction, and it really goes no further. And in fact, it goes to the Buki building, and if the student has no further violations during her or his academic career, that record goes nowhere. It is not given to employers. It is not released to third parties. It goes away when you graduate from Penn State for only one violation. If you had a multiple violations or a second violation, it's a little bit different. Okay. So if a violation, if there's evidence of a previous violation, the committee may then meet and increase the penalty for repeat offenders. Because the instructor giving a student a violation because of privacy laws here will not necessarily know, in fact will not know if a student has had a prior violation, unless by chance the prior violation occurred from that same instructor earlier in the semester or something like that. So basically when an instructor gives an academic integrity violation, would not know that the student has any priors, as we say. We would then find that out in the course of the procedure. Okay? If the student contests, again, either the allegation and or the sanction, the case is then reviewed by the Academic Integrity Committee, which I will be the chair of for the next 7 days only. I have 2 cases to go to this afternoon, sadly, that we're going to consider. And we then have our procedures. The student can provide to the campus or college committee his or her view on what occurred. You can question and respond to all information provided in support of the allegation. You are allowed to come and talk to the committee. You have a right to be heard. You can also, if you don't wish to be heard by the committee, you can do it in writing. You have the right to bring an advisor with you, like a student advisor from the advising staff. Okay. And if the review finds the student responsible for committing the violation, the sanction recommended by the Academic Integrity Committee will be imposed. We as a committee can do a couple things. So an allegation of a violation comes up to the committee. We can say no violation occurred. We can overrule the instructor. And you'll say, well, when would they do that? We have done that. The committee has met and has overturned allegations of violations. Has said that no, it's not reasonable under the circumstances to give this student a violation. We can agree that a violation occurred, but not agree with the penalty. We can agree that a violation occurred and agree with the penalty imposed by the instructor. We can agree with the violation and the penalty, but then we get a sealed envelope that tells us that the student had 4 prior violations, and then we can increase the penalty. We can always increase or decrease the penalty. So we can determine, we review, did a violation occur, and was the penalty imposed appropriate? That's the role, basically, of the committee. Okay? And there are no further appeals from that. There is no sort of, you cannot go and say, I want to speak to your manager or your supervisor. That's it. We are the committee. The only appeal is when the academic sanction is being dismissal. If you're actually being dismissed from the program, and I don't know of any case that that's happened, then there is an appeals process that goes up through the university. But otherwise, what the committee says is the final word. Now, what you need to know is that the penalties for violations, there's on the form, there are, when the instructors would fill out the form saying there was a violation, the instructor has the option of imposing either academic and or disciplinary sanctions. There are cases I've seen where an instructor wanted a documentation that a violation occurred, but did not impose any sanction. Just wanted that paper to go up to the Buki building, I suppose in case the student was going to have possibly would have another violation later. But usually there's some type of academic penalty. We'll get to that. There may also be, but does not have to be, a disciplinary penalty for more serious cases. Okay? If the academic violation is considered extreme. In addition to an academic, you can pursue a disciplinary action. Okay? Disciplinary action. Interestingly, and very important for you to know, once a student has been informed that academic dishonesty is suspected and that a form has been issued, the student may not drop the course. Because that's the first thing that students sometimes try to do. They figure, if I quickly drop this course, it goes away. No, it does not go away. Right? Once you are notice that an academic integrity violation has been alleged, you may not drop the course. You may not withdraw from the course. Any drop will be, I guess, reversed. I don't know how that's done, but I have had a student in one of the cases we were adjudicating who immediately tried to drop the course, and that was not allowed. Okay, question?
But if the result is a failure or a grade reduction, can you drop the course after?
That's a good question. If the result is a failure or a grade reduction, can you drop the course after? I don't think so. I actually don't know that. We'll have to find that out. That's an excellent question. We've not been confronted with that. So in other words, you get an academic integrity violation, you're given a failing grade in the course, and you drop the course. But doesn't that failing grade still appear on your transcript? I think it does. Yeah. 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 Question.
Will there still be, will the same process, like, would you still be unable to drop it, or would the drop be reversed if the academic dishonesty was found out after you had dropped it? Like, let's say you turn in an essay and you're like, nope, bad idea, drop the course immediately.
You can, the wording as you see says, once a student has been informed that academic integrity, once you're on notice that the instructor is going to do something about it. So I think in the case, I wouldn't recommend doing it, but I think in the case of you did it and your conscience got you, you said, whoa, I just did a really stupid thing, I better drop this course, before the instructor even read the assignment, that technically, the lawyer in me says that technically does not seem to, that's technically not a violation, yeah. First up.
What about, so say you're teaching and something like this happens, so you have to like kind of judge, like, is there kind of a general rule, like, does some of this go on, like, I mean, say employers are employers going to know about this if they're trying to hire the person? You don't want to ruin this person's life.
Yeah, well, well, it's a good and very tricky question, because as I said, you only ruin the person's life if it becomes part of the permanent record. And as I hope you've understood, that it only becomes part of the permanent record in certain cases, usually multiple violations or very serious violations where the disciplinary sanction has been imposed. So you're not ruining the person's career if you give them one violation and it's their first and then it ends up being their only violation. That, I guess, is torn up when you graduate here and it never leaves the Buki building or wherever they keep all this stuff over on main campus. So the problem is that, as I mentioned, the instructor probably doesn't know when he or she is issuing the violation if there are any priors. Because if there are priors, that's probably going to become a permanent part of the student's record, and you could have an impact that is then releasable to prospective employers and so on. So, it's a judgment call on the basis of the instructor. How egregious, how bad does the instructor think this violation was? Was it somebody signing for somebody else on an attendance sheet, where really it's worth like negligible with just a question of principle, or is it wholesale copying of a major assignment or assessment? And then that's up to the conscience of the instructor. Instructors are not obligated to, go forward with these violations. They can give verbal or other warnings. And I should have mentioned that maybe at the start. There is actually, it's I guess it's cool to be an instructor. You're often in what the gamers call, God mode, right? I mean, you're sort of, you have a lot of really flexibility in what type of sanction you want to impose. Now again, it can be reviewed by the committee. But in the initial instance, you have a lot of flexibility in what sanction you want to impose. Really good questions. And then the procedures. What type of academic sanctions can there be? And there are a whole range of them. Redo the assignment. It could be a warning. Reduced grade. You get 1 letter grade less for the assignment. 0 for the assignment. 1 letter grade less for the course. Failing grade for the course. And I guess most extreme, dismissal from the academic program. Very great degree of latitude on the part of the instructor. And again, the university's academic integrity policy provides for these 2 types of sanctions, academic sanctions and then disciplinary sanctions. And there's guidelines that the instructors can refer to, but there is a lot of autonomy that the instructors have. A lot of leeway. If it's really serious, these are examples of the disciplinary sanctions. There's this designation called an XF, meaning fail the course, and the X stays on the transcript for a certain specific point of time. The F will stay. The XF basically is reserved. It means fail by way of an academic integrity violation, and it's really reserved for the most serious breaches of academic integrity. Repeat misconduct. There can be a warning, probation, suspension, and so on. XF is sort of, you fail the course and you get this X. I'm not entirely clear of what types of conditions, it's not really spelled out on the Penn State website, I was checking that out this morning, what types of conditions need to be fulfilled, but basically, if you have no further offenses throughout your career, the X will go away from your transcript, but the F will remain. XF is bad. Okay. Now, to reiterate what I said, academic integrity or dishonesty cases which result in academic sanctions only, they are generally not reported out to others. They're the ones I said, they go up to the Buki building, and when you graduate from Penn State, they're torn up and nobody will ever see them. But the ones in which there was a subsequent academic dishonesty or integrity violation, when you're a multiple offender, then they start keeping it. That's why they keep the one until you graduate. If you graduate with a clean record after the first one, it gets torn up. If you get a second one, then your record starts to become public. And also when it becomes, when it results in disciplinary action, which is the instructor thought that it was so bad that he or she imposed a disciplinary sanction, then it becomes part of your record that is then reported out to prospective employers, government security, clearance people, and that follows general guidelines that I don't know exactly what they are, outlined in the general records release policy of the university. Okay. Last but not least, I won't keep you guys too long, the Committee on Academic Integrity, that's the committee that I'm currently chairing. Each college shall appoint, and these are the things we do. Ensure fairness, consistency, review all contested cases, of which I'm going to have 2 this afternoon, as I said, and so on. This is pursuant to Penn State Senate policy. Now, I don't have a slide on this, but I can tell you, I just got information and update. As I said, we had about 40 cases in the last academic year. Not all of them, the overwhelming majority of them, by the way, did not go up to the committee. The majority of them were accepted by the student, and the student accepted not only the violation, but the sanction imposed, and we in the committee did not see them. I only know about them because I asked the person who collects them up in the dean's office to give me a breakdown, and she said there are about 40 cases in the last year. We have probably heard no more than a dozen or maybe even less cases where there has been a contested case. The types of things, I'll just give you some illustrative things that have been over the last academic year here. We've had plagiarism of assignments that were revealed by Turnitin, this sort of Turnitin website. Right? We've had open book use in a closed book exam. We've had students flicking from one screen to another. We've had people violating the attendance policies by signing for people who weren't there. We have had cases of the All Course Heroes and whatever it's called, and Quizlet, or All Course, whatever it is, Course Hero. We've had 4 or 5 cases of that where material has been copied verbatim from that which was uploaded to that website. We've had students use act as a team when there was an individual assignment. You sort of get the idea. We've also had assignments turned in that were copied directly from the internet. We've had people who are sitting next to each other during an assessment, a multiple choice assessment or whatever type of assessment, submit substantially the same answers to every question, including getting the same, 7 answers wrong out of 100. And I'm not a statistician, but the statistical likelihood of that is probably pretty low, of people putting in exactly the same work and getting exactly the same things wrong. So you can see we've had quite a few cases over the years, and 40 last year. Now, I was going to do some exercises, but I'll just leave them with the presentation and turn them over to the folks who are running this program. I don't want you to force you guys to go through some exercises. Is this plagiarism or is it not? I'd like to stop here and take any questions you folks have, because we're running a little late. We got a little bit of a late start. So are there any overarching questions or any type of questions that would refer to any of the material that was discussed today? Yeah, come back.
When the committee is making a decision about sanctions, an academic integrity allegation, are those decisions made in a bubble away from the student's existing records? Will the committee know whether the student has had a previous violation when making the decision?
Yeah. Very good question. I'm glad you raised it because I thought I should have said that. I didn't. Or maybe I referred to it, but I didn't quite get it across clearly. When we as a committee meet, we first have only access to the information that is presented in the given case. An academic integrity violation form has been submitted. The student has challenged it, either the allegation itself or the sanction. We then we invite additional information from both the student and the instructor. As I said, the student can appear in person or can submit information in writing. Likewise, the instructor can submit supplementary information because the form is pretty small. There's a little block you fill out on the form that's not that much. The instructor can provide additional documentation, or the instructor can come and also discuss it with the committee. Once all that is done, we then make a preliminary determination of, do we agree that a violation occurred or not, yes or no? If no, it's done, violation's reversed, student goes free. If yes, we then go to the second part of our analysis. If we believe a violation has in fact occurred, do we agree with the penalty that was given by the instructor? And then again, it can be, the toggle can be yes or no. If it's yes, it's done. Well, it's not necessarily done. If it's no, we decide what it can be. We can either reduce the penalty or increase it. After that is done, we then have a dramatic moment where a sealed envelope is brought to us, and that only then we can open that envelope and see if the student has had prior. So that gets to your bubble question. Good question. At that point, we then see, does the student have any prior violations? And if it is no, then whatever we had just decided stands, because we had decided that based on the assumption that there were no prior violations. If we find out that this is the second or third or fifth violation of the student, then we reconvene, so to speak, and think about, do we need to impose an even greater? Because there is, the position of the university is that there's usually a sort of a cascading up, that's the wrong word, but ratcheting up of the sanctions when there are repeat violations. Repeat violations are considered to be more serious. Does that get to your question?
Yeah, but I have one hat on.
Go.
So, will an envelope be delivered even in the cases where the committee decides that, say, no violation actually occurred? So they decide, all right, we decided the student, they didn't violate any academic integrity, and then they get the envelope and they see the person has committed a prior offense.
No, I guess, in cases where there's no violation, that we determine no violation occurred, we won't change that, because that means there was a prior, but there's no subsequent violation. So the student still has the same one violation on record that she or he had, and there's no further action. No, that's a good question. If we determine in this case that there's no violation, we don't need to get to the envelope. The envelope was already there and stays there, and the student has a clean record, but for that earlier violation that's in the, really good question though. Other questions? If not, then I would thank you for your attention. This is stuff you probably don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. I mean, we take this very, very, very seriously at Penn State. And I hope I impressed that upon you and gave you some clarity about what the types of things are that we consider to be violations and what the procedures are if there are allegations. As I said, I hope and trust that none of you will ever be involved in any of this, but it's a necessary part of your orientation to have heard this, and I appreciate your attendance. So good luck with the rest of your program and your careers here, and if you have any questions, you can ask me for the next week. Otherwise, you have to figure out there'll be Colonel Jacob Graham will be the next incoming chairman. You'll be able to find out who he is through the faculty list. Okay. Thanks very much.